Thank you. Okay, folks, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for another one of our TESS seminars, our weekly TESS seminar series. And as you all know, TESS is our Center for Tropical, Environmental, and Sustainability Science here at JCU. One of our quite active centers. You might not know it today, but normally we are very active center. It's a real pleasure today to introduce Rachel Ashegbofe. Rachel is one of these people, you see people occasionally like Rachel who are just out there in very desperate and dire situations, working with tremendous energy and determination and skill. And these are the type of people I think that in many ways are making the world a better place. I mean, they're the ones who are living right in the places where the rubber meets the road in terms of environmental conservation. In Rachel's case, she lives and works in Nigeria. I've spent some time in Nigeria. It's an interesting place to work. And she's working down in the Delta region in the south. And she founded in 2012, so it's 12 years ago, a very important NGO there, the Southwest Delta Forest Project. And in addition to that, she's been largely responsible for the designation of 5 new protected areas in Nigeria. And that's just huge. I mean, that's really almost as big as it gets in terms of promoting nature conservation. She holds a number of different high-level positions with the IUCN Species Survival Commission's Primate Specialist Group, the International Primatological Society, the African Primatological Society, and others. And she's won a couple of very prestigious awards, including the Whitley Award, which is very prestigious in 2020, and the National Geographic Buffett Award. I guess that must be named after Warren Buffett, I would imagine. But anyway, Rachel is someone who's doing tremendously important work, and we're delighted to have her here. And what is evidently not a completely unnatural hour of the morning. So 7 o'clock in the morning, I think, there in Nigeria. But anyway, Rachel, over to you, and thanks very much for joining us today.
Thank you, Bill. And thank you, everyone. And such a pleasure to be here. Trying to do this. So, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you're joining from. So yeah, I'm going to be talking today about tackling the urgent need for urgent conservation within the framework of local dynamics. And the photo you see right there, it's the Upper Creek River in Niger Delta, Nigeria. So just a little bit more about me. Bill has introduced me with such very kind words, and I really appreciate that. I do my best sometimes in very deep fertilizing mode, get our boots in the ground, I think, basically. And so yes, I'm the founder director of Southwest Niger Delta Forest Project. And really did start as a research project or a research organization. No, I believe very much the intention wasn't to create an organization out of it, but really to drive, to increase informed decisions for most of the wild areas in Nigeria. And as at that time, there were lots of gaps. And so I was concerned and started this research work, conservation research, and hoping that there will be some big organization out there that will take on the responsibility to address the issues that highlighted in the reports of this research. So, but anyways, it brings us here to this place where we became a full-fledged organization, and today we work in the Southwest and in the Niger Delta of Nigeria. So yeah, I think nothing much to say other than also I think I wanted to add that because that adds to the perspective of the work I do. My conservation journey started in 2005, and so by next year I'll be about 20 years in conservation. So it's a big deal, but I think it also speaks to the fact that a large part of those many years was just really frustrating efforts of trying to push for conservation agenda in most of Nigeria's wildlands and just see them disappearing. And so coming to this place where we are actually conserving areas, gives sort of like a different feeling, definitely. So now to the topic of why we are here today for topic of this talk. I will start by just taking you through a specific site. So my organization works in two major sites, or two major states, I say Ekiti State and Bayelsa State. So most of our sites now are in Bayelsa State. And so I will take you through what initiated the work we do in the Niger Delta right now. For a bit of background to the Niger Delta, for a lot of people who don't know about the Niger Delta in Nigeria. So it's the largest river delta in Africa, and as the second largest swamp forest on the continent, covering 15,000 square meters. It's the third largest contiguous mangrove in the world, which still largely understudied biologically. I mean, most of the recent reports we have for the Niger Delta surveys, I mean, ecological surveys started like in 1990s, early 1990s. And after the 1990s, insecurity, civil conflicts erupted in the Niger Delta. And so there were really no other further work afterwards in the region. So anyways, it's a vital ecosystem, and it's just off the coast of the Bight of Benin, and forms a larger part of the Gulf of Guinea biodiversity hotspot. And it's when it comes to the landmass of the Niger Delta, it's pretty small compared to the size of Nigeria as a whole. And geographically, it's actually in 3 different states: Bayelsa, Delta, and Rivers State. But we have what we call geopolitical zones in Nigeria, and that increases the size of that. I mean, in geopolitical terms, it means the Niger Delta, as far as the Nigerian government is concerned, covers more states than this, covers up to 6 states, besides these 3 states I've mentioned. Sorry, I'm trying to get, all right. So what you see here, I just showed you what the Niger Delta looks like in terms of forest. But what you see here is how the Niger Delta has been shared up or demarcated in terms of oil industry, in terms of oil exploration and extraction over the years. And oil was first discovered in the Niger Delta in 1950s. And since then, it has been the backbone of the national economy, and governments before now. I mean, it's a little bit less obvious now, but prior to this time, in the 90s and the 2000s, early 2000s, there was big reliance on the oil sector in Nigeria for 90% of the national income or national revenue, if you like. And so this dependence on oil means that most of the focus on the Niger Delta was for the crude oil deposits in the ground, and never for the ecology, the people, or everything else is more important than oil, definitely. So Nigeria, within a short period of time, and I believe now Angola has taken over from Nigeria as being the largest producer of oil on the continent. But at one time, Nigeria was the largest producer of oil in Africa. But of course, this comes at a very huge cost, and these are the local dynamics that I wanted to point out in this presentation before I go into the work that laid ahead of us. So most of this just gives you a background to what we had to deal with prior to our conservation efforts. So so the problems in Niger Delta are really interconnected. Of course, there's the oil exploitation, the extraction industry, and oil and gas, that is. And those led to a lot of unaccountability because the federal government, well, the government in general, they have been really involved in and they have a huge cuts from the oil industry. So there's a lot. There's been a very I mean, the transparency and the accountability for these oil companies have actually been put to question in so many ways. And so, yes, there's the oil spills that leads to habitat degradation. And the map here shows you how widespread these oil spills. I mean, these maps are gotten from civil society groups that have tried to, activists, environmental activists that have tried to bring attention to the devastation and the rocks that was going on in the Niger Delta that was committed by these oil companies. And of course, where there is oil spills affects local livelihoods, and in return, the communities out of the desperation and the frustration of having to live in abject poverty and underdevelopment, take up arms to challenge the status quo, and in their own way find other ways to cash in on the oil extractive industry. So there you have in this photo here you have more oil spills because there were just more locals who break pipelines to extract oil from existing pipelines. Of course, they will put this when they break and take the oil out, they're not going to put back the fix the problem or fix the pipelines back. And then, of course, what you have is more massive degradation. So yeah, so these are the maps from the oil spills, gas flaring that happens in the Niger Delta. This middle one here is the gas flaring, and the rest of it is the oil spills that have been recorded in the Niger Delta. And these are the ones that were made known, and these are just the ones that people could map and were made known to stakeholders that people are aware of. So I've already mentioned the problem with armed conflicts that started in the early 2000s, and these actually is also so this is just shows the guns, the arms, and the conflicts that erupted, and what the Niger Delta really was like in the war with the oil industry during the past 10 years. And I mean, we don't see things like this are no longer happening in the Niger Delta, but it certainly was the situation before we started our work on Niger Delta red colobus monkey. So I gave you a background first. So by the time I start talking about our work, we worked with these situations as underlying factors to whatever we're doing, the actions or the activities we're implementing on ground. And so the pictures you see here are photos of the Niger Delta red colobus monkey. So I'm happy to show you these pictures, but definitely it took us several years to be able to capture this. At the end of my presentation, you'll find out why we're able to have these photos of this monkey. So yeah, one troubled primate amongst others, one troubled region, one integrated approach. So about the Niger Delta red colobus monkey, occurs in central Niger Delta. It's endemic to this region. So imagine that with all of these things you've seen about the Niger Delta, you find this primate surviving here and only known to have ever survived in this area. And it has been attributed to the existence of one of its major food trees, which is Alia lendemanai, and which occurs in the swamp forest in central Niger Delta. But also it's a very valuable timber product. But I wanted to also show you that I didn't just get into the Niger Delta because I was like sitting in my room and thinking, oh yeah, I like the situation in the Niger Delta, and why not go in there and see how to risk my life, and anybody else who's willing to work with me. So no, it wasn't in that situation. So what started all this for me was like way back in 2012. I began working my research work, like I told you, Southwest Niger Delta Forest project started as a research project. And at that time, I just wanted to fill in the gaps for Nigerian Cameroon chimpanzee. So in 2011, the IUCN Regional Action Plan for the Nigerian chimpanzee had just been published, and I was looking at it. I held it in my hand. I was part of the researchers who contributed to this document, and it was just for me eye-opening to just see the picture for myself, like holding that document and just seeing that gaps do exist. Like you can see here in the Niger Delta region, what you see here as samples. This is a map from Max Planck Institute, and here they've collected fecal samples for chimps across their range. Here you find the West African chimps, the Nigerian Cameroon chimpanzee, and the Central chimpanzee, the Eastern chimpanzee. So, and they were diligent enough to get all of these samples from all known species of chimpanzee. But gaps existed in the Niger Delta. And so I began my work in the southwest of Nigeria. And at the time, I was also still looking at it that these areas that had been highlighted in the Niger Delta also have gaps. So, of course, that was for me my interest. So after I finished my work in the Southwest in 2012, I went into the Niger Delta. And I think that's one of the achievements of my work, of the project. Because prior to this time, for almost 20 years, researchers have been trying to get samples of fecal samples in genetic materials to find out the subspecies. Let me go back to the last slide. So the subspecies of chimpanzee that occurs in southwestern Nigeria. So you can see for the samples here that there is a biogeographical barrier that would have separated the West African chimpanzee from populations in southwestern Nigeria. So that's really what informed the curiosity for the sampling of chimpanzees in this area. But after several attempts, none of them were able to get genetic materials for this. Well, we were successful in doing that, and we worked with a scientist, geneticists. So I'm not going to bite my tongue with this. In Copenhagen Zoo, and we sent samples to her, and then this was the result of it anyways, and it was a good work. So we found that the southwestern chimps are indeed different, and the only areas where the samples overlapped or where there was gene flow was samples we got in the Niger Delta. So this is for the PTs, Pantrogylite eliti, which is the Nigerian Cameroon chimpanzee. And so this is the Western chimpanzee, the Eastern chimpanzee, and then the Central chimpanzee. So where the overlap exists between the samples we collected and that of the Nigerian Cameroon chimpanzee was with the samples we got from the Niger Delta. Now, back to the work we did in the Niger Delta. And I will move quickly with the rest of this because I don't know how to know how I'm doing with time. Who's going to help me? Sorry, I have to push this. So yeah, back to the Niger Delta. We conducted surveys across the species range. And let me just say again that the Niger Delta red colobus monkey was known to occur in an area of 1,500 square kilometers. So our work covered the entire range of the species that has been known. So prior to our work, or prior to the insecurity that occurred in Niger Delta, there was one intensive work that was done by a PhD student from City University of New York, and it was supervised by one of my mentors, Professor John Oates, for that study. And so that was the only known real work that's been done on Niger Delta red colobus monkey. So it was discovered in 1993. And so this work started in 1994 for PhD, a PhD study, and ended in 2000. And from 2000 to the time we got into the Niger Delta to survey the area was 13 years. So at the time, there was a lot of fears as to the status of the species. So while I was working on chimps in the Niger Delta, brings me back to chimps again. And then I had Professor John Oates asked me to check on the status of the Niger Delta red colobus monkey. And so that was the connection, and that was what happened and brought me to the Niger Delta. So amongst the surveys we did, of course, we spoke to many indigenous people, and this it's just when we're trying to get indications of whether they know this species. So we are doing some sound check here. The vocalizations of different species, what is going on here. But the reason I put, let me allow you to listen to this for a while. So yeah, the reason I put this video up here was, we're trying to get the vocalizations of different species of primates, and it was part of just assessing local knowledge and getting their own input on the species, on the target species we're looking for. But the reason this was very important for me to include here in this presentation was that prior to this time, this was 2013, and prior to this time, the pictures I had, and like everybody else of the Niger Delta, I grew up in the north of Nigeria. I'm not in Northern, but I grew up in the north of Nigeria. So I give you a little bit of perspective on that. So that's a bit far away from here. Although my mother is indigenous to the Niger Delta, and anyways, but that has nothing to do with this. But I needed to point this out because prior to this time, I've really never been to the Niger Delta. But this scenario, captured there for me, it was just a feeling of being in the midst of people that didn't quite look like what we're made to believe about the Niger Delta, of guns, of people running around, trying to kill people, trying to kidnap people. What I met here was quite different. And it was years later that I realized that I could tap into the ingenuity of the people that live here and just their sincerity of purpose for their land and for their forest. And so I wanted to bring this point of view out there before moving forward. So the survey was concluded. We couldn't find in the study that had been done in the 90s for the species, it identifies 16 community forests where these species occurred. We only recorded the presence of this species in 4 out of the 16 community forests. And we found that they had become extinct in the remaining areas. And out of those 4 forests, communal forests, it was just 2 that were viable. And so we reckoned that the species was going to be extinct in a few years. And I think we gave it plus or minus 5 years and at the time. And the year was 2015 when that survey was concluded and the reports, the data was analyzed. And we also estimated that there were only about or less than 500 individuals left in the wild because they were really hard to see. And in that 2 or 3 years of going around their range, I only managed to see them once. And it was really, really embarrassing. And that probably was one of the reasons why I resolved to do something about this situation. So besides the oil industry, the insecurity and all that, which we've already learned, but was going on in the Niger Delta, other threats were emerged from our work then. And one of the major ones was artisanal logging. So of course there was no, the waters were polluted, the traditional livelihood of the people had been compromised, which is fishing. And so they went to the next best thing, which is logging and timber extraction. And that one did not have any regulation, no government regulation. Nobody is going to ask them why they are taking, because of course, the rest of the world saw the Niger Delta for the oil and only the oil. And so they could do what they want with the forest without knowing better that cutting the trees was also destroying their own livelihood. But anyways, artisanal logging started, and because these people were traditionally fishermen, they brought in external help, or should I say external workers or laborers to get them to speed up the logging process in the forest. So deforestation was happening at an unprecedented rate, and that was leading to, and I believe that's what led to the species being extirpated from most of the known areas where it once survived. And so, of course, hunting, bushmeat consumption, commercial bushmeat consumption also was an issue. And so this is just like a map of where the situation was, how this is what it really looks like in the range of the species. And logging was by far the most predominant threat to the species. And of course, let's have the other issues going on, not just in the Niger Delta, but across Nigeria. And if there is any issue going on in Nigeria, one of the things I found was that it's even amplified in the Niger Delta. So at that time, Nigeria was named the poverty capital of the world. Just imagine that. I mean, so yes, Nigeria was named the poverty capital of the world. So that means there were lots of poor people in the country and would live below $1 a day. And that's pretty much amplified in the Niger Delta. There was huge unemployment, and youth population was almost half the entire population. So you can already imagine what that looks like in terms of dissatisfaction, disenchantment, restiveness from the youth. And so comes solution. Before I go into this, I just want to point out that it took a space of about 7 to 8 years for us to really arrive at a solution. So, but with a slide is one slide away, okay? But I think one of the most important things for me was that, like I mentioned earlier, the whole idea or the objective of the organization at the time was just to do meaningful research work and produce reports or results that could be handed over to the people I consider as stakeholders, big NGOs and governments. And we were going knocking on doors to get solutions, to drive solutions for the problem at hand. For, of course, there was still a lot of insecurity in the Niger Delta at the time. Nobody wants to go there, even the government people. And so it was a lot of back and forth. It was a lot of try this and try that. And when that didn't work, it was at that point that I went back to do another survey of the 4 areas where we had identified some population of the species left, and every one of those areas, these species had become extinct in every one of those areas. Forests had been depleted, not depleted, I mean, totally devastated, like it was destroyed. That there was some of these forests where, one of these forests where we had identified as an important area for conservation before, and we couldn't even, I mean, I'm trying to think of a species that is easily adaptable to destroyed forests, and we couldn't even see, like, it was so hard to even see a grasshopper in this area. So I'm trying to give you a picture of how the forest cover was just cut down and there was just nothing left there. And so it was just remaining just one area where the species can still be found, and we didn't have any time. And we knew logging happens mostly in the rainy season because people would cut down trees, they dig canals so that they can easily move the trees, the logs out from the forest with the water. So when it's the dry season, they don't do logging because there are no roads in the Niger Delta, of course. And the terrain doesn't allow for movement of those logs out. So it's always during the rainy season that they log large numbers of trees, moving through canals that goes to the main river. And so we knew that in another rainy season, there would be no Niger Delta red colobus left, and we knew something had to be done. And that was at the point we approached the one local community in whose forest the species still occurred. And so, of course, we knew that for us to drive this conservation action, it required a multi-layered solution, or you could call it multifaceted solution. And some of it is what is listed here, doing some communication research, monitoring. But I think what top on that list was definitely protection of what's left of the Niger Delta red colobus monkey. And at this time, we were only able to confirm the existence of one group of less than 100 individuals. And the year was 2019. And so in 2020, we started engaging the communities, and COVID hit, of course, prior to this time. But prior to COVID, early 2020, we did something that we felt was also very paramount, was very important first step. We took the community in the Niger Delta to the only known effective community-based conservation area in Nigeria at the time. And that place is in the mountains in Cross River State, southeastern Nigeria. And there you have 9 communities who have come together in an association to protect Cross River gorillas. At the time, Cross River gorillas too also topped the list as one of very critically endangered wildlife in Nigeria. And so we had them have this community-to-community learning, and that's the photo you see up there. And so we did some aggressive campaigns as well to get a lot of people on board with us and to let them know that if the Niger Delta red colobus goes extinct, it's an integral part of the culture of tradition that's just been lost, because the name Colobus epiene, which is the species name of Niger Delta red colobus monkey, was derived from its Ijaw name, which is epiene. And so we emphasized this fact during those advocacy efforts. So yeah, and 2020, COVID hit. By September 2020, we signed an MOU with the community that we were going to support them in creating a conservation area. And so that started happening formally in 2021. And so the area was created, but of course there were processes to this. There was a lot of meetings, consultation, participatory mapping, participatory this and that, negotiations. But anyway, we made it happen. And so yeah, it's an area of I mean, it's pretty small when you think in relative terms to what protected area looks like, but it was a start, and by the end of this presentation, you find out that it was really a good core. And so yeah, it was 10 square kilometers, about 1,013 hectares of area. And we recruited people from the community, trained them, taught them how to, because of course, this is the Niger Delta. It's not something any external body can go in there and do. So we realized that from the beginning, and I think that's very important. And I think that's one of the emphasis of my presentation, is that there needs to be like a localized level effort, and it should be tailored to each site. And so So we did a lot of capacity building of the managerial level in the people who manage the sites in the communities. We trained the rangers, trained people that would collect monitoring data of the species, and they got to work. And what you have is the start. This was the demarcation. The middle photo is the demarcation work that was done for the area. And then, of course, there was species monitoring, and these also were people from the community whom we trained to collect data on species and other wildlife, ecological data, take photos, and all of that. So the training was not one-off training; it was just it's still an ongoing training even to this day. And of course, there's a lot of education and outreach going on. And yeah, we got help from a lot of partners, like the viewfinders you see with the children was provided for us by Partners for Red Colobus, a group in the US who and used monkeys that are found in this environment. I don't know what the sound is.
Attention, please.
Okay. So monkeys that are found in this environment, they were put in the viewfinder for the children to be able to appreciate primates and other animals found in their forest.
Attention, please.
So that's the radio announcement, but I don't want us to go into it. And so, of course, there was community development and livelihood program. I must emphasize here or say that I know there's been a lot of, campaigns, I don't know what to call it, campaign, or a lot of publications I've seen about how community development contradicts or it's in the long term it ends up being unproductive for a conservation program, and sometimes it makes the people very reliant on these NGOs, organizations partnering with them. And I would like to disagree in this case, because our experience with that is that we came into a community that their rivers were just coming back from being polluted. I forgot to mention that the very first time I saw the Niger Delta red colobus monkey in 2013, I was knee deep in crude oil. So there was a spill in this same community where we're conserving. There had been an oil spill all over the forest floor and into the water. So of course, fishes are not in this river. And that was the very first time I saw this monkey. And so by the time we started this conservation work, the forest had just the crude oil, the cake had caked even in the forest floor. By this time, it was still there, and the forest, the waters were still very much still coming back out of cleaning itself from the crude oil. So there was no cleanup done by any company or anything like that. Anyways, I think the point is we got into a remote community that didn't have any educational institution. We didn't have any infrastructure whatsoever. There was entrenched poverty. They lived off of subsistence agriculture, except for the logging, which was the main source of significant income coming into the community. And here we are trying to ask them the last forest remaining, the last patch of forest remaining where they could cut trees should be preserved, and we were encouraging them to do that. Of course, it would have to come there would have to be a trade-off, whether we wanted to follow systematics or principles that people have done elsewhere and not providing or seeking ways to improve their livelihood or not. So, I mean, these are not the complete photos of the things we did, but we boosted the educational system. At the time, there was not even school. The state government provides teachers for their schools, but that doesn't really happen. Like, it's not guaranteed. So they can go an entire year and the children don't go to school. So we support with a school system. Now they have steady educational system where we support with the teachers who work in the school, provide you teaching educational resources, renovate the school and all of that, provide the health center So now they have a health center, and this is quite recent actually, provided them with the health center fully equipped and all of that. And then we trained them in different livelihood options for them to have what do you call it? For them to do any micro, small or medium enterprises.
Attention, please.
Sorry, this sound keeps coming. So yeah, so it's not just Niger Delta red colobus monkey that benefits from it. There are hornbills, grey parrots, potty-nosed monkey, red cap mangabe, which are also threatened species in this landscape. There's also the West African dwarf crocodile. All categories. There's also the pangolin, and yeah. And so yet, despite this conservation work, there were still challenges. It was very hard to change behavior of these people. So you still find people within the community going to kill wildlife. I mean, after 2 or 3 years, animals like the duikers had decided to increase significantly. And so in their minds, they were like, oh, since they started to increase, we can go help ourselves with 1 or 2 from time to time. And so that mentality was still there, get some pangolins, so they capture pangolins and all of that. And so it was really hard to change that behavior because, of course, it's behavior of generations. They lived off of the forest, they lived off of not just the trees, but of course the animals as well. And so the second major, which was more the biggest problems we started to face was that this area had become a biodiversity island. So everywhere else in the landscape had been destroyed because of this timber business. And so what was left was this area where we started to conserve. And so most of the incursions that was coming in, encroachment, was from neighboring communities who felt like, oh, if you're not going to use the forest, we could as well help you. So, yeah, and then that happened. And so yeah, and they were not just coming to just log those forests, they were coming armed because they know the forest is protected. So they come in armed with dynamites. So we've had in the last since 2021 till now, one of my team members have been killed. We've had the office in the community for the conservation area vandalized 3 times now. Losing count. And yes, so we've had all kinds of threats, dynamites, gunshots. I mean, the most recent death threats, I get that so often that the most recent could have been maybe a month ago, 2 months ago. So yeah, so that's, and also finding a kind of livelihood option that is sustainable and that really can be practicable in a remote community such as this. But yeah, there are critical insights here, which I think are very important to also draw up and emphasize some of these ideas. Of course, they didn't come from us, they came also from other works that has been done by people across the world in different other landscape. And one of the most important things there was that even for us working in Southwestern Nigeria and Niger Delta, we realized that we are in the same Nigeria doesn't mean the context is the same, the sites, the people are the same. So for each side, there's context-based, there's local context where solutions need to be tailored to, and solutions cannot come from conservationists. It has to come from the people, and that is a very fundamental part of having like us sustaining the outcomes of conservation work that has been done. The photo you see right there is the management planning session, which we had with, so we trained them on how to draft or put together their own management plan. And so the community, the conservation area now has its management plan, and that was the session. So things initiatives has to come from the community and not from people who are not going to be living with the consequences of any decisions made. So that has to be important. And also, government remains powerful and the most important part part of the puzzle that needs to be fixed together. So while we're working with communities, we needed to still bring government in. One primary reason is because, for example, when the rangers will arrest or apprehend people from neighboring communities who have violated the protection of the conservation area, they couldn't try them in court or prosecute them in any formal, in police stations or anywhere. So they made communal laws as a community to protect that areas, but those communal laws has no effect on another community. And so government has to come in at some point to create the relevant laws that really does protect this species. And so that whether there is violation of this, these people can actually be prosecuted in a formal system that would send a message across to anyone who wants to also try to violate this area. So I think also this is also one key aspect to one of the critical insights which we gained. I mean, it was a lesson learned. It was just a journey, a learning journey for me personally, and I think for the rest of the team throughout. So there were different stages and different phases of participation for the people. And I believe right now where we are is where they have both self-mobilized and where they are interactive in their participation. So they are quite active in the participation now. But we didn't, I mean, there are so many theories, so many documents which I go through about community-based conservation and how to go about it. And they talk about this is ethical, this is non-ethical. And I think this is where I'm coming from with this presentation, that sometimes you don't have, when a species, for example, looking at the local context in which we are to work, this was urgent. You don't have the time to try to be grounded in some systematic principles, but rather there is always room to grow through processes. And I can say for sure that it was passive participation as at first, whether it was considered ethical at that time or not, it was necessary. And besides, I mean, where people don't have an idea about conservation before, how would you expect them to participate actively when they are just learning about it? I mean, right now they can actively participate because they've experienced it firsthand, the advantages. They've seen their forests cleaned. They've seen the population of the Niger Delta red colobus monkey rebound. I mean, we're recording 300 individuals in that same areas where there was less than 100. And they've seen that for themselves. And it's not fable, it's not tale from people who know lots of book. Like in Nigeria, we would say, like, you know, book, and you're just trying to tell us what to do. So they've seen it for themselves and they were involved in it. And so they can sit in any room without me or anybody who have the scientific knowledge, and sit in any room and defend whatever is going on there. And I think that is major and that's huge, but that was a process. It didn't just happen from the beginning. So where they are now making the decisions for themselves, creating their own management plan and deciding, committing to following through with the objectives of that management plan. And so what you have here, so fast forward to beginning of this year, from 2020 or 2021, wherever you want to start from, when we created our community conservation area. Now, this is what that map looks like. We found a solution, and that's one of the reasons I think I was very happy to do this presentation. I did sort of like a workshop like this in University of Oxford in 2022, and it was trying to find a lasting solution to the problems we have. I identified these problems and people brought suggestions, and I was like, why don't you work with the neighboring communities rather than fighting them? Create a kind of system where they can restore their own habitats. And also, after all, the population of the Niger Delta red colobus monkeys is expanding, is increasing, and they will need habitats, suitable habitats where they can move to. And why not work with them to neighboring communities rather than fighting or trying to see how to persecute them? and see how to get their own forests rehabilitated. And that's where we are. And now we are creating 2 additional conservation areas next to the Apoy Community Conservation Area. So making 3 sites in this landscape. And this is the icing on the cake, because you remember the image of the Niger Delta you saw with all the pipelines and all of that. So for us, we are just seeing that changing. And where you see now, it's a new project which we also started again this year. And communities have learned within this old landscape, communities are learning about the work we are doing. They've seen the transformation of the Apoy people and the people we're working with. And they are approaching us and they were like, bring this initiative to us. We've also got wildlife. And so starts our ocean project. I know nothing about marine. So if there's anybody listening, we need help with implementing this work. But anyways, we started this ocean stewardship project for marine wildlife. And in Nigeria, is it 600? We have 600 kilometers of coastline and no marine protected area throughout Nigeria. And this what do you call it, push pin here is where the Apoy Community Conservation Area is, the first conservation work we started. And just downstream from there, it's we're creating something else that we didn't originally intend to, but this is just one of the outcomes of our conservation project. So thanks to a great team. I'm not working alone for sure. This is just one nice picture from the community, but thanks to a great team that I'm working with. Like I said earlier, now we have like a team of 60 persons and across our sites, not just in this Niger Delta area. And of course, we have the backing of so many partners and sponsors who are helping us. And you could also try to follow us on our social media platforms. Thank you so much for listening. I'm sorry if I took more than my short time. I was
Great.
not keeping track of time, and there was just no way for me to see whether I was doing well with time or not.
Okay, great. Thank you, Rachel. That was a very interesting talk from a part of the world that's has a lot of stuff happening in it. Any questions here or any questions online? Anybody? Okay, just hold on 1 second.
Thank you, Rachel, for that amazing talk. It's quite hard, but it's amazing. Everything that you have done so far is amazing, incredible. I want to ask you, what would be the best or one of the best advice that you can give people like us hearing from you to help out with this project, besides getting funding?
I'm sorry, you have to say that again because I really hearing you.
I think her comment was, what can we do here to help you? What can people in Australia do to help you? Or I guess from Latin America in your case too? Yeah. Yeah. So people outside of Nigeria.
Yeah, that's a very good question. Thank you so much. I mean, help can be in any form. And we are always looking to build capacities for these people. We've gotten opportunities to take some of them outside of that place. I mean, one of the highlights for us is to get many of these local communities away from the community to other parts of Nigeria, and then we've been working on, we have actually been on this for over a year now with one of our partner organizations, but it has not worked out. We're trying to get the rangers to Kenya to do like a peer-to-peer learning experience, and they've been so excited about this. We got the educator out of the community. He traveled to Rwanda for a training, and he came back revived, and it was just like, and many of them, one of the things we're riding on is just the commitment of these people. And this commitment didn't just come from, you know, being in the community and hearing us talk about conservation, is seeing the conservation work, but then being able to get them that exposure that the rest of us, like for me, like I didn't mention at the beginning of my talk that I had a degree in public administration. So I came this far with conservation because I got access to training. And I think it's something that I am very, very happy to bring to these communities, not just in Apoi, but every one of these communities where we're working in Niger Delta. I think it will really, really change mindsets, it will change perspective. It will give them a different vision that they've always had growing up. So that's one area. I'm not saying that's it, but that's one major area. And so, but it's in everything, capacity building, helping us to technically, because like I said, I had my first degree in public administration. Of course, later I got a degree in conservation project management, but it doesn't mean I know everything. So yes, and then there's the rest of my team. And we want to learn how to do better, how to improve on the work we're doing. I know there's always room for improvement. So yes,
great. Thank you, Rachel. And since we're late here, we're going to just have to keep our questions and answers quick. Anybody have a quick question for Rachel? Because we're just about to run out of time. Rachel, I was going to ask you who funds you and who supports you. And then you showed that slide at the end, which was an amazing variety of different NGO and other organizations. Who are your main funders? And do you feel like the funding that you're receiving is stable enough that you're allowed to do grow your operations and continue them?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I mean, in the beginning, we just survived on very small grants and small, medium-sized grants. And of course, that's not enough. That can't do what we're doing. But Rainforest Trust was the first organization who came on board to give us a long-term funding. And that was for 4 years. And that gave us like peace of mind for those 4 years and captured in many of the work we're doing, whether it's in livelihood, protection, monitoring, and all that. And so that 4 years is rounding off, or has rounded off. It's rounding off this year. And of course, that puts us on set, makes us on set to the beat. The expansion work we're doing in the new sites, now, I mean, the funding came in this year for another 3 years with Darwin Initiative, which is the UK government. And so, yes, that's another big relief for us. But for now, those are the two main big grants we've received.
Very good, thank you. So, folks, any last questions here before we finish up? Anybody else? Okay, sorry, Rachel, we just, our system shuts down automatically, so you're just about to lose you. So thank you so much for coming and speaking to us. And I can say, having been in places like the Niger Delta, I'm not sure people outside of that understand what a crazy, wild, environmentally degraded place it is. You are fighting, you are in the lion's den and doing amazing work. So thank you very much, Rachel. I think we're all obliged to you.
Thank you. Thank you.